Hey, what's up, horror fans? It's Danny from the Lassercast, and I'm here with my buddy Pete. And Pete just popped his Black Christmas cherry.
Oh, yeah.
The original Black Christmas, 1974, by Bob Clark, one of the all-time classic horror films. We have actually had videos about this film on the channel.
Hmm.
Charlotte and I did a review of Black Christmas last year for our
Yes.
holiday horror section,
Yes.
and this is really the first time that we're kind of dabbling into holiday horror this year.
Hmm.
So, you know, I guess with my Black Christmas sweatshirt right here, and
Yes.
you having poor Claire in the background of our video here, I guess
Yes.
the obvious question to start is, Pete, you're a little late to the party here. What
What
you
else is
think of
new?
Black Christmas?
I actually loved it very much. The very first time we ever talked about it on the channel was when we had a holiday horror like episode, and we had the special guests, the Ghost Girls from Ghost Girl Greetings, and everybody raved about it. Whether it was you, Chris, Tony, Lori, it just sounded like a great movie. I had my like preconceived notions about this film, and then it kind of went beyond what I thought it was going to be. The whole thing about this movie nowadays, when people talk about this movie, they say, "Oh, it was made by Bob Clark, the one who made A Christmas Story," and I always thought that this looked really disturbing and dark. And the thing is, might have broken my Black Christmas cherry tonight for the 1974 one, but I might have done like a little bit of butt stuff with the 2006.
That's actually, given the 2006 movie, that's actually a disturbingly accurate, probably way to describe it, because the 2006 remake is
Yeah,
a really dirty fucking movie.
it really is. Yeah.
It takes, like, to quote Spinal Tap, it takes Black Christmas and it turns it up to 11.
Right.
There's like hardcore incest in that movie. There's uh, fleshy uh, cookie cutter Christmas cookies. There's eyeball stuff
Yeah.
that would make Lucio Fulci proud. Yeah. Uh, I
So
think the 2006 remake
yeah.
is actually I am not gonna go on record and say it's a good movie, because it's
Okay.
not,
Yeah.
but it is a totally watchable remake in the sense that it offers you something that the original, it gives you the spirit of the original, but it does something a little bit different.
Okay.
And it offer, if you want your splatter and your gore and your really nasty shit,
Right.
you're gonna get it with there. Um, the less said about the 2019 Black
Oh.
Christmas, the better. I'm not touching that movie with a 10-foot pole. Uh, so,
Yeah.
uh, all I'll say about that movie is uh, Chris Stuckman, very, one of the most popular, one of the most famous YouTube reviewers, film critics,
Yeah.
does, I think, one of the best critiques of that movie.
Okay.
uh his video is well worth watching, the 20 minutes of it. He handles he handles it from a, like, here's why it's a bad movie, but then also here's all the stuff about the controversy surrounding it. uh yeah, this is a movie that, the original 1974, it's been remade twice, both
Right.
wildly different remakes.
Yes.
And uh it's one of those movies that, we also talked about it in our Shudder's 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments countdown.
We did.
It comes up in there.
Hmm.
And it's one of those movies that very often gets overlooked when people discuss, the slasher film. A lot of people consider, pun fully intended, that Psycho is kind of the mother of the slasher film. And then a lot of people jump to, I think unfairly, Texas Chainsaw Massacre gets lumped in as a slasher, even though it's very much not.
Okay.
But I think Halloween is the movie that most people think of when they think of like the prototypical slasher. And coming out in 1978 and basically being the feeder movie for the entire 80s slasher craze.
Right.
I mean, Sean S. Cunningham, who directed the first Friday the 13th, has gone on record and basically admitted, yeah, I was trying to knock off Halloween.
Right.
I named the movie Friday the 13th because I thought, Halloween was on Halloween. So this movie will have its own little thing. And, he tried to, and he created a slasher franchise there.
Right.
And Black Christmas kind of gets overlooked, even though, like, it's very obvious that Carpenter, I don't want to say copied, but certainly emulated a lot of the really cool shit that Bob Clark did in 1974.
Yeah. Oh, come on. There's so many things that these two movies have in common. You have the POV shot of Billy in this movie and then Michael in Halloween. You have these like saucy female characters that are, in Halloween, they're high school age, and this they're, college. Yeah, they're in what do you call it? Sorority
house.
Right. And then you have like some like incredible actresses that are just in there too. Like you have Margot freaking Kidder. I understand that like she's not Lois Lane yet by the time of this movie, just like Jamie Lee Curtis wasn't Jamie Lee Curtis yet. I want to say like a little aside too. Two things. I know that like in movie talk nowadays, we don't talk about like how beautiful women are and stuff anymore, just because it's kind of weird and it gets non-PC. But I had to say that like Margot Kidder was just like stunning in this movie. And then the woman that plays Jess, I don't think I've ever seen her in another movie before, but like I kind of
Olivia Hussey?
Yeah, I've never seen Olivia Hussey in anything else, man. What else is she in?
She's the original Juliet in Romeo and Juliet.
All right, well, there goes that.
You never watched that in English? That was like for most guys our age. Those were like the first boobs we saw because like our English teacher got away with showing that because it's Romeo and Juliet, even though like you kind of see her boobs in it. I was like,
yeah,
I think I saw that in junior high. Like, but she also, she's also made a few other movies. I'm like completely blanking now, of course.
Sure,
but
I mean her name is familiar, obviously.
Yeah. But yeah, she's great in this movie. And so I just showed Black Christmas to my horror movie club.
Oh God, okay.
The way the calendar broke, we have 4 Thursdays in December.
Yeah.
And so it usually takes me 2 weeks to show a movie because we only stay like an hour after school.
Yeah.
So we showed Black Christmas and a lot of the kids were fascinated. And as a history teacher, I got to talk about like how important the movie was in the sense that Roe v. Wade had just actually happened. It was that Supreme Court case was 1972. Yes. So it's like 2 years after that Supreme Court case, you have a woman in what most people, most critics would probably call this like just a horror movie, disposable slasher movie. And you have like a legitimate abortion subplot of this in this movie. Yeah. And it's handled so well. And I think in part because Olivia Hussey is really freaking good in this movie. Yeah. Also, like you're talking about the cast of this movie, her boyfriend is played by Keir Dullea, who was the main guy in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, shit.
He's Hal.
Oh.
No, he's not. He's Dave.
No.
Hal is the fucking robot.
Yeah.
He's Dave.
Yeah.
In 2001, John Saxon, of course, plays the detective.
Right. As he normally does.
Yeah, as he normally does in like every horror movie between 1974 and 1990.
Right.
So the movie has a really good cast. And I think it's also one of the funniest horror movies.
Right.
Like Mrs. Mack is legendary.
Fantastic.
Hiding bottles of brandy in like Bibles and just everywhere in the house in the toilet tank.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what Tony mentioned and Lori mentioned when we first talked about this the first time around. I was surprised at how funny the movie was. And I know that like Bob Clark made it, right? Christmas Story, everyone has seen it 15 times just last year, right? On TBS. But the whole sequence where the woman that's in charge of the house is just taking the dad around, you know,
Oh,
uh, Claire Harrison's dad, Mr. Harrison, she's taking him around, and like there's that poster that she kind of covers with her hand, and you know, there's all this like shit. It's just fantastic, you know.
so I'm playing the movie for my Fright Club, my horror movie club,
Yeah,
and I always put the closed
disclaimer.
captioning on,
Oh,
and I made the awful mistake of doing that with this movie because I
oh,
never realized how Billy's phone call, especially his first phone
obscene,
call, there
obscene.
there is a lot of C words
Oh yes.
and just all yeah, I like there were a lot of giggles and I was like, guys, I've made a terrible mistake with the closed captioning. I'm
Yes,
like, please don't go home and tell your parents about this phone call.
yes. I'm
And
gonna be working at Barnes and Noble next week. That's the end
but
of my job.
I mean, yeah, just the humor in this movie is so good. Even some of the edits,
Mm.
like the juxtaposition of scenes, with even the way Bob Clark films. Here, the boyfriend's name is Peter, right?
Yeah. Yes. 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 Yes.
When yeah, you would remember that. He
Yeah.
like his piano audition where it's like the camera's like zoomed in on him and he's like "Ugh, ugh," and he's like dripping sweat like he's Robert Hayes landing an airplane in Airplane. It and then like he just like bashes the piano. It's so freaking funny. I feel so bad for Mr. Harrison in this movie. He's being dragged around. His daughter's dead in the freaking attic. Nobody ever finds her. And he's
Yes.
being dragged around by Miss Mac the whole movie.
Yes.
Curse that.
So okay, so that's the one thing, right? It's so perfect that she's there throughout the whole movie, and they cut back to her multiple times. That is what they say in that 101 scariest horror movie moments. They talk about that aspect that she's always up there, that she's the last shot in the movie, she's on the poster. But knowing that before I had seen this movie, I was like, okay, well, a big focus of this movie is finding this girl, and no one ever thinks to go look up in the attic. Like it's one of those things where you have to like overlook it. I've said this before. I hate people that nitpick movies, but I feel like it's Days, right, where she's dead and missing. Like she would kind of smell over
I
time, right?
I think that like I used to have an attic.
Yeah,
In my old apartment,
yeah,
we had an attic, and unless I physically had to like throw a box up there, I wasn't going up in the attic.
yeah,
And it just doesn't seem like a place in the house that anybody goes other than just throw shit up there.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like I always thought to myself, like, yeah, why would Claire have gone up in the attic? So why would anybody look for her there?
Sure.
And I kind of got the feeling that, like, okay, yes, probably a month or two later, there would either be a smell or but I mean, there's also the other thing where Miss Mac does eventually go up in the attic and she's
Right.
immediately killed. So
Right.
if Billy is going to be hanging out in the house, he might
Yeah.
be just killing everybody who gets close.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like we mentioned, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that influences Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, when I thought of like the killer is inside the house, I always thought of When a Stranger Calls.
Correct.
That movie came out 5 years after this one. So
Oh
this
my god.
movie like set up that cliche also. Like it wasn't a cliche in 1974.
Yes.
Like I can only imagine. I wish I could have like seen Black Christmas in the theater in 1974. I feel like that would have been a crazy reveal, like an amazing moment of like being in the theater and being like, oh, like we know I we know from the opening scene that the killer's in the house.
Right.
But it's just it's a great like moment when Jess finds out and like my students are like legit yelling at the screen because like the detective's like, Jess, you have to just get out of the house right now. And she of course turns around to go look for Barb and the other girl, Phil,
Well,
and she's and my students like, get the fuck out of the house. What are you doing?
yeah.
And I'm just like, and then you mentioned the ending, like the camera in this amazing shot, like pans in on her, Claire's face in the plastic bag, the shower curtain or whatever. Plastic bag, right?
Yeah.
It just keeps panning away, and then the credits start to roll. And one of my students was like, "Wait, that's how it ends?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, that's
Yeah.
how it ends." And like the kid just looks over at his friend, and goes, "Yeah, that's fucked up."
Yeah.
It is fucked up.
It really is. No, because honestly, you keep talking about how it's like sort of like the proto slasher, but in a lot of ways, I think it's kind of better than a slasher. Like before, you said that the abortion plot was like this B plot, but it almost feels like the abortion plot is like the main plot, and the missing girl is like the subplot. Like it seems like the missing girl is a big deal, but it's always kind of put in the background, just like she's kind of tucked up in the attic.
Not even that, but she doesn't even become the most important missing girl in the movie because like the whole neighborhood is searching for the other missing girl. Imagine you're the dad. Mr. Harrison shows up, his daughter's gone, doesn't know where she is.
Yeah.
He ends up going and finding another dead girl, and now he's watching another grieving mother, and he still doesn't know. Like, I totally empathize with that character.
Yeah.
And like I feel like he's such a sad character in horror movie history. Like
let me
I
ask you
love
this.
her boyfriend though. I love her boyfriend.
The hockey player?
Charlotte and I always talk about how he has the greatest coat in the history of movies.
Okay.
Like the giant fur coat that looks like he like wrestled the skin off a bear. It's amazing. Oh, it's so freaking glorious, that coat.
Let's go off on a tangent for a second because I need to understand something. The Suspiria remake, right? Tilda Swinton plays a man in that, right?
She plays the old man.
Right. So
telling like the Holocaust story.
Right. So spoilers for the Suspiria remake, but that old man is like looking for someone too, right? Like his daughter or his wife or something, or right? Isn't he looking for someone?
I only saw the Suspiria remake one time in theaters, and I thought it was good.
Yeah.
I thought it was creepy as hell.
Yeah.
But I would be hard pressed to remember because I remember thinking that whole old person plot was 30 extra minutes. A movie that should not have been 2.5 hours.
Okay. Because I thought like that. I've never seen the original Suspiria. I've never seen the remake, and I think I watched like the dead meat, the kill count for the remake or something. I saw a YouTube video of it. Maybe like Chris Stuckman or someone reviewed it, and what do you call it? That character seemed tragic too, and I was wondering if that was inspired by this movie too.
It's possible because the original Suspiria is a legit 90-minute door-to-door, amazing movie with some of the most brightly colored graphic images you'll ever see.
Right.
And then like the remake is 2.5 hours, and 30 minutes of that is this like just weird plot about this old Tilda Swinton man.
Yeah. Sherry wants to see that one, and I've seen shit about that, and it looks really disturbing, that one.
Oh, all the stuff that takes place in the dance studio is really fucking creepy in the new one. I mean, I think it's done by Luca Guadagnino, he's an amazing filmmaker. Like,
didn't he just make a movie recently?
Yes, and I didn't get a chance to see it in theaters, so I'm probably gonna, this is me being cheap, but as soon as it like goes from like $20 on Vudu to like a $5.99 rental, I'm definitely gonna Bones and All, which is
that fucking movie. Everyone keeps saying that movie, either they hate it or they think it's the greatest thing in the world. There's no middle ground.
I've seen it get talked about like it was. I've seen several people on Twitter in the horror community say it's their favorite horror movie of the year.
Yeah.
Somebody I know said it's like the modern day Near Dark.
Oh, okay.
And
wow.
Which, if you look at the trailer, it does kind of feel like that. Like,
Agreed. Yeah.
kind of like a cannibal vampire road movie with some romance and an older figure who just wants to kill people. I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm dying to see it. The last few weeks, I couldn't get out of the house once I got in the house.
Yeah.
And I found it very difficult. But like, yeah, I definitely want to see Bones and All.
Yeah, I know that I took us down like a couple of different alleyways there, but we're talking about horror in general. This movie obviously was an influence on them. There's an incredible amount of stuff that came out this year that we still have to cover before we get to our best of. But bringing it back to Black Christmas, 1974, I do think that the dialogue and the acting itself is something that we should kind of circle back to, because like, for Margot Kidder, I've only seen Margot Kidder in the Lois Lane role. I've never seen her in anything else. In this, she kind of plays this drunken co-ed who, is pretty blunt, which she sort of is like Lois Lane in this role too. She's just says what she thinks. She's not censoring herself at all.
There's also the scene where like she gives the little kid a sip of alcohol.
Yes. I mean, there's this one scene where like the kids in the sorority house, there's kids there to see Santa. And like he's just cursing right in front of the kids, and she's just sitting there, and yeah, it's ridiculous. And then of course, like I was wondering, you're watching this in front of your students. She says like fellatio like 15 times.
Oh my god!
And slowly,
that poor cop that everyone makes fun of. Oh, it's the best.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Apparently, in 2022, I don't think anybody knows what fellatio means anymore.
Oh yes.
Thank God.
And we've got to teach him.
Yeah. No. But yeah, I don't think I did. I was expecting to hear a lot of giggles from like my club, and nobody made a sound. And I'm like, they don't know what fellatio means.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they did read every word that Billy said in that first phone call.
Oh yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that for a second, because just his phone calls alone are really disturbing. They do a lot of like crazy audio stuff in this where he like kind of whispers and mumbles, he says things, he like shouts very loudly and he's upset. Like he's a super erratic character, and you never really see him ever.
Anything more than his eye.
Right.
And they do a great job of like, they do show when he's killing Barb, they show like the outline of the way his hair might look.
Right.
So that is all done to like trick us into thinking later on that Peter is the killer.
Right.
And like, even at the end, like some of my students were like, wait, so she killed her boyfriend and he was the killer the whole time? I'm like, no. I was like, she thought he was, and he broke into the freaking house like a crazy person.
Yeah. The ending is like, for a modern audience, you're thrown off because they just sedate her and they leave her in the house where all this violence happens.
And there's also like, there's reason to think that like off camera at the end of the movie, she's being killed.
Yep.
And like it's a real gut punch of an ending when like you're just staring at the outside of the house and you see like the one cop is like outside smoking a cigarette.
Right.
And like everybody thinks that the killer is dead, so nobody thinks to double check anything.
Right.
Yeah. The one thing about this movie, like you said about nitpicking, the one thing I always thought was, if he's making the calls from inside the house, he's screaming.
I know.
On the phone. And these girls can't hear that screaming from anywhere in the house. They don't think to go like,
wait a minute. Yeah.
And I love that the 2006 remake, that basically somebody watched this movie in like 1990 and was like, what's he saying on all those calls? Let me write all of this down. And they were like, I'm gonna make a movie about all the shit he said in those phone calls.
Yes.
Because like there's no backstory to Billy in this movie. Like we don't even know if that's his name. We just assume it is.
Yeah.
And we know nothing about him as a character other than the crazy nonsense gibberish stuff that he's yelling in the phone. The 2006 movie was like, well, he said this name, that's his older sister,
Yeah.
and he's talking about his mother, so the mom is going to have sex with him because there needs to be an incest storyline.
Yeah.
Where it's also like Chinatown because it's his sister and his daughter.
Yeah.
And they apparently like to squish eyeballs together.
The 2006 version is like the Batman Begins of Black Christmas. You know, they have to like go back and explain his origin and stuff, you know? Like, oh, this is why he uses plastic. Yeah, yeah. But okay, here's other, because let's just do tangents tonight. It's Christmas time. Carla Gugino is not in the 2006 version.
I'm not sure. I don't think so. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is in it.
Right. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is in it. Michelle Trachtenberg is in it. Kate Cassidy is in it, right? From like Arrow.
She's Black Canary.
Black Canary. Right.
From the TV shows.
Yeah, I could have sworn that Carla Gugino was in this movie. I thought that she's the one that like looks up and a fucking icicle comes down and like goes through her head.
Oh, I remember that scene. I don't remember if it was Carla Gugino. It might be. Carla Gugino might be like an older sister who shows up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but I don't know. I might be just like pulling it out of my ass.
Who else was in that? Wasn't one of the girls from Party of Five?
Party of Five, the one that was in Lost in Space. Yeah. The
one that was. I don't even remember who played like the lead. Like who was the lead girl?
I think it was Michelle Trachtenberg.
No, she gets killed. I remember that because.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm looking it up right now as we speak.
Was it Mary Elizabeth Wint? No, I'm not sure.
She would have been really young in that too, by the way. Lacey Chabert, who I don't know who that is. Let's see. Michelle Trachtenberg.
She's the Party of Five girl.
Right. Okay. Oh, Kristen Cloak. Maybe that's the one I'm mistaken for Carla Gugino. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know, man. It's got a really good looking cast too, just like this movie has a really good looking cast.
Yeah, too. that movie was like a murderer's row of like it girls from the early 2000s.
Right. The horror kind of. They would also go into other genre stuff. You know, CW shit. Yeah. So I mean, what else can we say about this movie? That remake is directed by Glenn Morgan, who was a writer on the X-Files. He also, you know, we talked a lot about Monkey's Paw a lot this year because of Nope and because of Quiet Part Loud. He was a producer on that Twilight Zone reboot, but I didn't watch that. But
I've heard Glenn Morgan before. Yeah, I like I said, the 2006 version is just, it's a total guilty pleasure movie.
Yeah.
Like if you're just in the mood for some like, if you know, having seen Terrifier 2 twice, it's like the Terrifier 2 of the Black Christmas franchise.
It's the Batman Begins and Terrifier 2 of Black Christmas.
Yeah.
Yes. But it's a lot of fun, this movie, and it's also like disturbing as hell. It's kind of weird how it's both, you know? It's like funny and also just like really dark and bleak.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, there was this movie. There was this like thing that I watched called like the 50 greatest horror movies that you've never seen.
Mm.
And like some of them were like really obscure, but a lot of them were like, come on, like this was number one. And I'm like, who at that at that point I was like, who hasn't seen Black Christmas though? But I guess as you proved, you know, but you know, like I think it's great that like, you know, you obviously love horror movies and horror in general.
Yes.
And like you could fill a blind spot of like a classic movie that you haven't seen, and it still holds up to this day. I just rewatched it a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
And the movie just holds up.
Yep.
It's, you know, you even said it. It's funny as hell.
Yeah.
It's creepy as hell.
Yes.
You know, and it's also a movie that's very of its time because of like, you know, I had to explain to my students that like the guy running around plugging in like phone lines, like what that was about.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I had to explain that to them. Some of the, uh, you know, the, even like sorority culture today,
Hmm.
fraternity and sorority culture.
Right.
I feel like I guess like since like what was that, the Duke lacrosse scandal, and there's been like a lot of like that feels like almost something that like modern movies won't touch in
Yeah,
a positive way. But
yeah.
like the sorority culture in this movie was so positive. Like
Yeah.
Barb is a complete alcoholic, Margot
Yeah.
Kidder.
Right,
And like
right.
the girls genuinely take care of her.
Yes,
And
yes.
like, yes, she ends up getting killed but she's killed in bed because her friends put her to bed to like
Yeah,
sleep off a drunk.
yeah.
And there's no guys in this movie like sneaking around, and there's no explicit sex in this movie. There's
That's
no
a good point.
nudity at all.
Yeah.
It really does a great job of showing like sorority culture and
Mm-hmm.
and college life,
Mm-hmm.
and like the positives of it, where like just a decade later you get into the 80s and you get into like slumber party massacre, sorority house massacre, and
Right.
sorority row, and all of these like, and those movies are just, they're filled with TNA, they're filled with characters who only want to have sex and nothing else. Even Halloween, to an extent, like
Yeah.
the character of Barb would
Yeah.
basically be like the character of Linda in Halloween, where it's supposed to be a high school kid,
Yeah.
PJ Soul's character, but
Right.
she's like, I am going to fuck my boyfriend tonight in
Right.
this little kid's house in the mom's bed, and I'm gonna smoke cigarettes and drink beer and show my boobs to the screen, and it doesn't matter. And you're like, this is supposed to be a high school kid. Meanwhile, these are college girls, and they're, like, even, and we know they're having sex. One of the girls is freaking pregnant.
Right,
So it's
right.
like, and they even handle that so tactfully, where it's like, you know, the the idea of a woman in 1974 telling her obviously older boyfriend, like, no, I don't want to have a kid. And he's like, oh, just marry me. And she's like, no, I don't want to marry you.
You're right, right.
Like I don't want anything to do with you, let alone have your baby.
Yeah.
Like, and he's basically just like, listen, drop all of your hopes and dreams and let's just get married and have this baby. And
Become a
it's just like,
housewife.
fuck you, no. And
Yeah.
it it really is. And like that's what bothered me so much about the 2019 movie is like, I'm like, this movie for 1974, if this Black Christmas would have come out today, there would have been people who were like, oh, it's too woke.
Oh my
And like,
God.
there would have been people who of course she wants to have an abortion.
Right.
Of course there's, they had to shoehorn an abortion plot into this movie and this
Right.
and that. And oh yeah, the boyfriend who just wants to talk ends up being framed as the murderer. But like the 2019 movie was like, no, we're gonna beat you over the head with like wokeness and modern day
Oof.
like politics, and like it missed the point that like 1974 had a really kind of politically sensitive horror movie
Yeah.
with empowered women in it,
Yeah.
and that this franchise didn't need that type of an update.
Right, right. It's a very interesting thing that's added, right? Because you, when we talked about it for our Christmas episode, and when they talked about it on the 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments, nobody mentioned the abortion thing either time. And so when I saw it today, I was like, "Whoa, what?" I was like thrown off, and you just aren't expecting it at all. The whole movie, because I know that the inspiration for this was that there actually were some murders that were in Quebec, because this is a Canadian film
Yeah.
too. I know that like those murders essentially inspired this movie. So it doesn't have that sort of slasher mentality, because you were compared to Halloween. I think a point that goes along with that is that in slashers, promiscuous women get killed, right? And if you commit a sin, essentially you get killed by the slasher. In this, she's committing the biggest sin according to like right-wing people, abortion, and she could potentially survive the whole thing. I mean, the ending is so ambiguous.
She is for this movie the
The
final
final
girl.
girl, right? Exactly. And so it's interesting that it's like it's before the slasher thing, so it doesn't fit that morality issue that is always in a slasher.
That's why I always loved Friday the 13th Part 2,
mm,
because they make it very clear in that movie that Ginny, the final girl, played by Amy Steele, is having sex with her boyfriend, who is like the head counselor, and she's just very intelligent and uses her intelligence to like beat Jason at the end. And it, Halloween, that was another like kind of thing that Halloween set up. The whole idea of like, if you're too horny, you're going to die.
right.
And, Jamie Lee Curtis was all innocent in that movie. And I love listening to Jamie Lee Curtis herself talk about that. And she's like, yeah, I was not Laurie Strode. And
Yeah.
it's just funny how that
Yeah.
became like her most famous role, especially to horror fans. Obviously, she's much more probably well known for other movies to the mainstream.
Yeah.
Even though now with Halloween 2018 and the new Halloween trilogy, like maybe she is most known for the Halloween movies.
Yeah, I think it's definitely come full circle, and that's what she's most associated with now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it's not like your typical slasher, but obviously slashers derive things from it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I will watch it again. I know that you guys, when we covered it on that special, a lot of you said it's like a holiday tradition. You watch this, and just do it every year.
I've watched this. I mean, Charlotte and I watched it last year, and we did a video, and that video is up on the channel if anybody wants to watch it. And I just watched it with my students in my Fright Club.
Yeah.
And this movie, Bob Clark, he could not have made two more different Christmas movies, but he might have made the two best Christmas movies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, Home Alone's pretty good. And honestly, I think I've watched every single movie that we talked about in that special, except there's that one movie that Lori really loved, which was, it's almost like Home Alone, but it's like a twisted one. What's that one called? The one where it's like a boy who's like just killing other kids in the house, and the girl is the lead. It's got like a Christmas title. It's kind of like, it's like Deck the Halls, but it's not that.
Oh, Better Watch Out.
There you go. I want to see that one too.
That's really good. I think that's also streaming on Shudder now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. That takes care of that. Yeah. So, what do you call it? Unless you got anything else to say about Black Christmas, we can just start plugging all the shit we got coming out this holiday season.
Yeah. I mean, what else has to be said? It's an all-time classic. Whenever people talk about like we're I have yet to watch In Search of Darkness Part 3. I have it. I have the digital copy. And I've heard amazing things about it. But like, obviously, we love 80s horror. But whenever I think of my ultimate comparison when I talk about 70s and 80s horror is quality versus quantity. There are so many 80s horror movies.
Right.
Yeah, there are some all-time classics in there. But the 70s was just friggin' banger after banger after banger. And it's literally, for me, probably like all-time classics like Jaws, Halloween, Black Christmas, Texas Chainsaw, The Exorcist, The Omen, Carrie, Dawn of the Dead, Alien. Like, that's just The Wicker Man. Like, it's like if I was gonna like if those were the only 10 horror movies that I had left to watch forever, I'd be like, okay, I'm good. And I 70s horror is untouched for me.
Yes, I love the 70s. Have you ever seen that documentary, A Decade Under the Influence?
No.
Oh, I remember I got to go to a screening of it a long time ago in New York. I had this girlfriend that worked or that went to NYU, and we went to go see the screening of A Decade Under the Influence, which I believe was um, director of Silence of the Lambs, and
Jonathan Demme. Yeah, he did a lot of
yeah,
like documentary and
right.
band
Did,
stuff.
did he have a brother though, Ted Demme?
Yes.
I think that's who did it. And you know, I watched that documentary. It's just like the '70s was just so fucking. I mean, that's sort of an obvious thing to say, right? The '70s were the best time for movies. Ah, yeah, we all know, right? But yeah, so good. And then and there was one other thing I wanted to plug too. Men, Women, and Chainsaws. This is a book that I read when I was in college. Carol J. Clover, and that's a book about the slashers and
Isn't that the book that like coins the final girl trope?
it
Or
might. It might. The original cover, I'm looking at an updated cover on here, but the original cover's got Leatherface on it. It's really good. And I don't know, that might actually be worth talking about at some point too. It's on Audible if you ever want to listen to it.
oh, cool.
Yeah, man. But let's plug some of our shit while we're here before
Yeah,
Christmas time.
you've only interviewed like 47 authors this week, right?
So that's something I should address. I I have interviewed 5 authors, and their videos are not on our channel right now, and I just need to go and edit them. I started editing one today, but yeah, I have a shit ton of interviews I've done. I did Paul Gandersman and Peter Hall, who did a segment in the original Scare Package, and the new Scare Package is coming out this week, which we're going to cover when it comes out. Besides that, I also interviewed Max Booth III again. I interviewed Stephen Kozanowski. I interviewed
Clay McLeod Chapman.
Clay McLeod Chapman. Thank you so much. Holy shit. Yes, that's an important one. And then last but not least, Cody Goodfellow, who he might not be as known as some of the other people I just said, but holy shit, his book, Perfect Union, that just blew my fucking mind. So, yeah. I'd say that like before 2023, I think I'll get at least 3 of those up before 2023. Go ahead. What do you got, man?
I honestly like I'm trying to think like it's the Charlotte and I reviewed Wednesday. We have on Netflix. I didn't do a video for it, but I watched the Netflix movie Troll. It's a Norwegian movie.
Yeah.
The best way I could describe it is imagine if 1998's Godzilla was a really freaking good movie.
Oh my, okay, wow.
Yeah, where it like instead of Godzilla, it's a troll in Norway. It's really freaking good. It's like the #1 foreign language film on Netflix right now. I strongly recommend it.
Okay.
Really good. I'm completely blanking on any what videos that have I put up?
You did the horror festival in New York recently.
New York City Horror Film Festival. I have a bunch of videos up from that.
You did Beetlejuice because you saw that live.
Oh, yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Yeah, Charlotte turned 12 years old this week, and we did a video about the musical on Broadway, Beetlejuice, starring Alex Brightman, and it was so much freaking fun. If you are a fan, if you live in the tri-state area, if you're a fan of the Tim Burton movie, you will freaking love this musical. And it's only out until January 8th. It's closing in 3 weeks now. So get your tickets now and go see it. It's so much freaking fun. Charlotte loved it. They have, if you're an adult, they have Beetlejuice themed drinks.
Oh, nice.
So I had the Daylight Come rum. And that was very strong and very good. Yes. And we just had a great time.
Yes. The cum rum. That was definitely one of the things that Billy talked about in his phone call in the beginning. And all the kids read it on the captions. Yeah, well, that's a good way to end a Christmas episode. Talking about go ahead.
Yeah. We are like, we're going to have to do our year-end review soon. Probably, we're not going to do it this year. We'll probably do it early next year, which will give us some extra time to see a few more horror films. There's definitely a bunch that I want to try to get through.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just, spent 3.5 hours tonight watching Avatar: The Way of Water, so that took away some horror movie time.
Yes.
But yeah, so look forward to our year-end review coming probably in early 2023.
Yes.
We do our top 10 countdown. It's gonna be really fucking hard this year because it's been such a good year for movies.
Yeah.
Especially horror movies.
This will be the third time that we've done this. So this will be over 2 years of the LassoCast, and it'll be the third time we've done our year in review. I have so many fucking movies to watch for that. But yeah, after we finish this recording, let's talk about what I need to watch because I need to get fucking caught up, man. But yeah,
and if you've made it this far, since
yeah.
Pete is 40 years old and he just watched Black Christmas for the first time.
Yes.
You acted like I just exposed like some deep dark secret of yours. We're both 40. It's okay. If you're still listening, what are some horror classic blind spots that you have and that you need to catch up on? Because I could think of a bunch of movies that like I know everybody's been like, oh my God, isn't that so great? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, shit, I have to see this movie. But
that's the story of my fucking life.
I mean, hey, I'm glad our channel's been able to get you caught up on, like, you recently saw like Hellraiser for the first time,
right?
Now
The Omen this year, yeah, dude. The Omen we covered last year at like New Year's. That's how long we've been doing this shit. It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of classics, and I still haven't seen Exorcist 3. I mean, there's a whole bunch. But yeah, good question. And then also, last but not least, what do you guys think about some of the movies this year that we should cover? So let us know. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. And Danny and I have a lot more presents for you before the end of 2022.